As one of the primary architects and first dean of the University of Rochester's School of Medicine and Dentistry, Dr. George Hoyt Whipple lit the torch to begin our heritage of educational excellence. After graduating from Yale and then Johns Hopkins as an MD in 1905, George Hoyt Whipple remained at Hopkins for a decade, advancing rapidly in the Department of Pathology, where his mentor, Dean William H. Welch, along with his teaching colleagues, Drs. William Stewart Halstead, William Osler, and Howard Kelly, were widely considered the founding fathers of American academic medicine. In 1915, he moved west to become a professor of research medicine and later dean of the University of California at San Francisco Medical School. Here he began the research in liver diet and blood regeneration that would lead to his Nobel Prize. Following the famous Flexnor Report of 1910, and later Abraham Flexnor's strong lobbying of George Eastman, Rush Rees, president of the University of Rochester, took a train trip to San Francisco. There, he asked George Whipple to become dean of a new medical school to be built in Rochester. Eventually, Whipple said yes. With the significant contributions of George Eastman and others, the University of Rochester Medical School was built from the ground up in terms of facilities and faculty. Its principal architect was George Hoyt Whipple, educator, builder, visionary, and remarkably diverse human being.
One reason that he came here is because in San Francisco, where he was dean, the 2 years of the medical school were separated from the other 2 years, way across town, and he didn't like that. He wanted the school to be under one roof. And that's one reason he came here. The other reason is that Russ Rees, the president, and his wife took the train to San Francisco, 4 days each way, and talked him into it.
And our original faculty, these are all top-notch people, world-renowned, like Dr. Fenn, who did all this work during World War II with deep-sea diving and all. But it was, and the school now, of course, has a good worldwide reputation. But he built it all up, and give him a lot of credit. And he picked a terrific faculty. It was my good luck to have the original faculty as my teachers, and they were all top-notch people.
He set the tone for the school. He gathered people with him who were as good as he was, but who were at different branches. And he saw to it that they had some support, financial support, for their own work.
The library was quite consciously placed at the center of the complex as a kind of intellectual gathering place where people could see and meet and talk with one another. Faculty laboratories were right next door to student classrooms. The dining room was at the center of the complex, and faculty and students and residents all ate in the same place. There was no separate faculty dining room. Those things were very consciously conceived to further this collegiality of everybody working in the institution. His values were fundamental to the early educational and architectural development of the institution.
Poor medical school applicant came one day for an interview, and he met with Dr. Whipple, and they wound up talking about fly fishing, since the applicant was an avid fisherman, and they consumed the entire interview time talking about fly fishing. And the student applicant was starting to get a bit nervous, and towards the end he said, well, Dr. Whipple, isn't there a little bit more about me that you would like to know? And his reply was, young man, all I need to know about you I have learned from this discussion about fly fishing.
He wanted to be able to pick the students. And he did a lot of picking. And I've known people who sat on the admissions committee, and they said, well, they come into a meeting and there'd be 2 piles of records there. And people say, well, don't worry about this pile. Let's talk about this pile. He'd already surveyed things and decided these guys weren't no damn good.
It was his strong belief that, I think his words were, money should be used where it's really needed. and not to paint the walls, and not to have dropped ceilings, but to pay the faculty and to support their research and the teaching programs.
The walls of the medical school were never paved. The floor was never paved. There was no tile on the floor. It was bare concrete. And the walls were left with this horrible gray brick. He said that was unnecessary. He had sort of first things first, from the standpoint of science.
With regard to our teaching, he was completely liberal. We had no instructions and no strings about what we should teach or how we should teach it.
He thought medical students were human beings. That was not a widely held thought at that time. He made it very clear to us when school started in first year that we were to not be here on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. He personally came and locked the doors to the labs with us on the outside. He told us we could go home and study, we could go to the library and study, but that he would think a lot more of us if we went for a bike ride, baked a batch of cookies, or went to the movies.
George brought medical students home for dinner, at least 2, often 4, every other Tuesday. It didn't make any difference whether I was sick in bed or what, but they were there. It was amazing. I remember the afternoon he came home, and he looked kind of dazed. And I said, "What's the matter?" And he said, "I've just been notified that I'm going to receive the Nobel Prize."
He had very bad allergies, and he used to wear this mask to filter out pollens. And there was a gala dinner here in town that he attended, and of course during the dinner he couldn't wear this thing over his face, so he had it hanging around his neck. And one of the dowager ladies in town who was sitting across from him leaned over and said, "Dr. Whipple, is that the Nobel Prize?"
I felt that I was compelled to ask his permission to marry when I was in medical school. He took it quite seriously, and I was right. It would have been terrible if I had gotten married without telling him ahead of time. He had my fiancée come up here, go through an interview that was at least as bad as applying for medical school, and did give permission finally.
He didn't like Franklin Roosevelt. Someone said they thought that FDR was his own worst enemy. And Whipple said, "Not as long as I'm alive."
Dr. Whipple, of course, had a great interest in baseball because he had actually played professional ball at one time, and I think he told us at one time that at one point in his career he had to make a choice between going into biology or becoming a professional baseball player.
Miss Purdy would have told you he had a real hierarchy as to who got what when he went fishing or hunting. She was given a pheasant one day, unplucked. If you were a little higher up, you would get the pheasant plucked and not have to do that yourself.
He was not only a good teacher, he was a good investigator, and very intelligent.
A legacy of collegiality, of students, faculty, clinicians, researchers, all working closely together. This notion that we're all under one roof within bareheaded distance of one another, that was a very important part of the founding philosophy.
I remember him as being a tall, erect, very precise individual with half-moon glasses, a sort of a twinkle in his eye, a very excellent teacher.
He was older than any of us except Bloor. He had the experience of having been dean at Berkeley. He was the kind of person that thinks out in advance everything he proposes, and he was very secure in his opinions, and he was naturally our leader.
George Hoyt Whipple lit the torch, then passed it to succeeding generations of educators, physicians, and innovators who have extended and grown his vision of excellence. Whipple said, "I believe a good medical teacher must be an investigator, philosopher, and/or clinician. I would be remembered as a teacher." Of course, George Hoyt Whipple is remembered as a teacher, builder, and in so many other exceptional ways. He was not a perfect man, often eccentric and idiosyncratic, but he created a near-perfect idea that many others chose to emulate by closely integrating patient care, research, and education. This innovative combination became the template for a new medical education, medical center paradigm in America. Tonight, we express our appreciation to you for supporting the Whipple Society and keeping the vision of George Hoyt Whipple alive. We thank you for passing the torch.